Welcome back. In today's video, we are going to look at advanced DOM manipulation. So in the previous video, we looked at introduction to DOM, what is the DOM, and we looked at different things we can do with the DOM. We looked at deleting, we looked at accessing and creating new elements. Okay, so in today's video we are going to take it one more step further. We see what we can do with DOM manipulation. There are a number of things we can do with the DOM. As we said in the previous video, this is where JavaScript shines when it reaches on manipulating the DOM, creating advanced interactions with the users, and we are going to continue and see how actually this can be done. So in today's video we are going to start with looking at modifying elements. Okay, so modifying elements, we mean modifying element attributes, and we are going to start with modifying CSS. Okay, so I want to look at how can you modify something like CSS. You can go ahead and do all those kind of stuff. Okay, so for instance, we can modify the style object, okay, on the element. So we have access to all styles on an object. So if you have maybe any element you have in HTML, you have access to its styles through the style object. Okay, so if you look at the screen, we have this access to this object that contains all different styles. Okay, it contains all different styles. Now I want you to be very careful with these styles. So there are some rules that we follow here when we are changing the CSS styles. So for instance, something that was 2 words, so let me demonstrate this. I need to have where to write. So for instance, let me show you here. So if you had font size in CSS, this is how we write font size. Here it becomes font, we do camel case. Okay, everything becomes camel case. That is one thing to note. Okay, I want you to take a note of that. Is a very big note. Okay, so background color, we can do background color, and this changes into background color. So that is something you have to take a note. Okay, that is something you have to take note. Let me just make this one somehow properly visible. Okay, so take note that this, how we modify the style object, that this font size, this is how I write it in CSS, but this is how it becomes in JavaScript. So this is CSS, and this is how it is in JS. Background color becomes background color, no space. We simply change it into camel case. Okay, so that is great. Let's do some examples with this modifying the style object, and we'll see how it goes. And this one is very 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 important, and we use it most of the times. Okay, so for instance, I'm just going to continue here, and we could just even have a small paragraph here, and let me just put some random, maybe 20, like so. So let me go to JavaScript. By the way, I already have my two files, HTML, and I've already connected to my JavaScript. And in the JavaScript, let's see how we can start manipulating. So if you look into the browser, if you open this in the browser right now, let's see how it looks like. So I'm opening, you could have also clicked on go live. It does the same thing, and yeah, it has started. So you can see I have a very basic page. Okay, I have a very basic page like so. Okay, so let me reload. So in the JavaScript, we don't have anything per now. We can just go and say console.log. It's working. Okay, always test, even when you are very sure, always test, and so that you are very very much sure that it is actually working. Okay, that is great. So everything is set up correctly. Now we can start working. So today we are starting with modifying attributes. Modifying attributes. Okay. So the first one we are looking at is modifying the styles. Okay. Modifying the styles. So let's first say, for instance, const heading. Okay, so now we could go here in HTML and we give this one a class. Let's give this one a class of heading. Okay, and I can go ahead and select the heading element. Okay, I could just say heading element is equal to document. I'm just going to use query selector, document.query selector, and the selector is heading. Okay, you said this query selector takes in the selector here equivalent to the way you would select it in CSS. Okay, so this is I'm selecting it, and before you do anything, always first test it in the browser and see is it working before you start applying things on the element. First console.log it in the browser and you look at it if it is actually there. So you can see I can see it here. Okay, so let's start manipulating this heading. Okay, so let's first change its styles. Okay, so this heading element right now we can access its style through this style. So when you say .style, you have access to now the CSS of this heading. Okay, for instance, you could just say font size. So at that point you can access, for instance, font size, and you can set it to maybe 2 rem. I don't know if 2 rem will work, but I think let's set it to, for instance, 2 rem is about let's just say like 45 pixels. Okay, 45 pixels. Okay, like that. And voila, you can see that now if we check this element, so let's inspect it. So you can just go here, click on this one is a selector element here, click on this, and you can see font size in styles is saying it is 45. Okay, that is good. We can go ahead and do more things. So for instance, heading element dot style dot color is equal to green. Okay, so we can also change its color. Voila, you can see how we are changing it, and all this we are doing it from CSS. And really here you can actually have anything, any property you could access in CSS, you can access it here. Okay, so we could, for instance, transform it into capital letters. We could just say header dot style dot text. Now text transform is equal to uppercase. Yeah, you can see that. So all styles, and you can see them, they are applying here. All of them, the font size, the color, the text transform, they are all applying here. So this is how powerful JavaScript can get. This is how you can manipulate the CSS. Okay, this is how you can manipulate the CSS of different elements. Okay, yeah, so this is great. This is great. Let's continue. So the second one, you can modify the ID. You could just get the element. We looked at this when we were starting modifying the ID. For instance, you could change, or you could give the ID to an element. Okay, so if we say the heading dot ID, so here if I wanted to give this element a heading, so let me just say modifying ID. So we could just say heading element dot ID is equal to heading. Okay, so if we do that, and we can check here, and if you check proper here in the dev tools, you see that this element actually contains a heading ID. Okay, the class we gave it, but the ID we gave it from JavaScript. Okay, so this is how you can modify the ID, and ID is always one, so you cannot add more IDs or anything like that. The element always have one ID. Okay, so let's continue seeing how we can modify. The another one that is very powerful is modifying classes. This is so powerful. This is so powerful, this modifying classes, and we will use modifying classes most of the times. We are going to use this modifying classes, adding classes and removing classes. So for that example, I'm just going to have here some things. Let me just create a button. Okay, So let me just create some button here. So let me just say button. Okay. So for instance, this button. So let me just say my button. Okay, and let me give it some classes so that we work on it while we are looking at it. So we are going to give it, for instance, a class called btn, and then we have also some other class which is like, for instance, active, and we also have another one, for instance, called inactive. Okay, so you're going to have very many classes for it, but just make just as a button, we work on it as a btn. So I'm just going to create here styles.css, style.css. okay, and I'm just going to start with a browser reset here, margin 0, padding 0, and box sizing border box. Okay, so if you don't understand this line, you can check, or you can comment in the description below, and you can also check in the CSS series. There is somewhere we talked about that one, so you can check on the channel and you see where we have CSS series, and you will see in the in the first episodes we talked about the browser reset, and we discussed more in details. So let's just work on this button. So let's start with working on the button. Let's look at things like padding. So just give it some little padding, top and bottom. I'm just going to give it just make it big enough, 1 rem, 3 rem. Okay, so this is a huge button. If you look at it here, is this class there? Oh, you have to connect here. CSS, guys, always remember to connect to link your CSS. Okay, so my CSS now is connected and my button is here working. Okay, so let me give it some margin. Okay, let me give this margin, and let me give a margin of top and bottom 1 rem, and on the side 0. And this I'm just going to reduce somehow to 0.7, and that one I think will be okay. Yeah, so this is great. This is a great button now. So now the first thing I want to do is give it cursor, pointer. Okay, so great. So this is looking great. So for instance, now we want to change to give a class of active. So right now let's give it some dark color. So for instance, we could give background color of let's just have 2 different classes. So let's say this is the button, and right now let's give it a background color of white. Okay, color black, and let's give it I think by default there is a border. Okay, so this is how it looks like right now, and let's give it a border radius of 5 pixels. So this is how our button is looking like. So we are going to have 2 more classes. The active class. So the active class is going to have background color of blue. Okay, and it's going to have border none, no border. Okay, yeah, and color white, maybe color white. Okay, and then we could also write the inactive class. Inactive, we just write like that, inactive class. So inactive class here is give it background color of gray. Okay, let's give it background of color of gray, and let's change also, we can leave the color white, border none. So let's first add these classes. So before you start manipulating with JavaScript, make sure that those classes actually, when you add them manually, they are working. Okay, so you can see the btn class has no problem, it is working properly. So let me just add here the active class. Yeah, you can see with the active class, you see how the button looks like. So let me add the inactive class. Yeah, and you see how the button looks like, and I can also modify the color. The color, let's make it not a bright color but somehow dull, not more dull like that, simply like that. Okay, so this is looks like an inactive button, and you could even give it cursor here. Okay, you could say, for instance, cursor, and I guess there is one for inactive. I don't know how it would look like. Not allowed. So I think it is that, not allowed. Okay, if you might not see it here, but if I now hover, you see it is this not allowed. Okay, so this is great. Now we have our classes. Okay, we have our classes here. We want to start seeing how do we add. So sometimes you have a certain class that you want to come at a certain period, okay, or the class you want to come at a certain event. So you have seen, for instance, on the login, if for instance, or if you are logging in, I think we are going to do that example whereby if someone is logging in, you can inactivate the button or you can activate the button. Okay, so now I'm just going to remove these classes here. We could even remove this one. So without the btn class, how does our button look like? So you can see this is how our button looks like without any class. This is a normal button with no any with no any styles. Okay, now some people can be thinking, can't we add all these styles? Can't we select the button and add the styles one by one? Yeah, it is very much possible. You could go ahead and select, for instance, we could select the button on top here. So by the way, I always do the selection at once. So if you are selecting all your elements, select them from above. So you could say, for instance, const btn element is equal to document dot query selector, and you could use just a button like so. It has no problem, and you can go ahead and do console.log but btn element element like that. So you check it in the browser if it has worked. Check on the console here, and the button is here. Okay, so this is great. We can see our button here. So after you have selected, of course, you could go and add styles, font size, color. So for instance, if I wanted to, so here we are on modifying classes. Okay, so I could just say, for instance, the button element dot style. I could access the style, and I say, for instance, background color. So you see here it gives you all these things. Okay, this is the great with VS Code. It is ever saving you a lot of time. So background color is equal to I could say blue. Okay, I could do that, but you realize this is a very tiresome task, writing all these classes, all these properties, like for instance we gave here, and the ones even we gave here. So if you have to add one by one, it is a very tiresome task. You will end up with a very huge JavaScript file doing a small thing. Okay, so what we do is we can extract all these different styles, we put them in a class. So for instance, you could have a class btn in CSS that actually is holding all the styles for that particular incident. For instance, if it is a button, we could have all the classes of the button. If it is for the active state, we could put them here. If we have the inactive state, you could put them here. So what becomes good is that instead you simply swap those these classes instead of writing these styles one by one. Okay, so now we could add a class. So how do we add classes? So let's start with by adding classes. Adding classes to elements. So how do I add a particular class? Okay, so there is an object on all these elements, and it is called, let me take this one off here. So we could have our button element, and then we can have access to class list. So this property of class list, so this property or this method on the button elements allows us to add classes, to delete classes, and to even toggle classes. Okay, so we are going to see how we use that one. Class list is very important, and we are going to see how useful it can get. So for instance, if I wanted to add a class, I call this class list method, and then on it I can now say I can call another one called add. Okay, so you could add, so button dot class list dot add. Okay, and what are we adding? We can add a class. So for instance, let's add btn, as simple as that. So if you do that, you see now in our HTML, you can see the btn is there. Okay, you can see the classes, the class is there. So this is great. So you can see we can magically control the look of this button using the classes that we defined in CSS. So instead of doing all this, doing one by one, we simply add one class that is having all the styles that we want to apply. Okay, I like this technique. I think is the most effective one than adding one by one the styles. Okay, oh great. So we can also go ahead, for instance, btn element dot class list, and we can add, for instance, the active. Okay, so could just say add the active. Look at that, look at that now. So if you look here, you can see the button has now two classes. It has the btn class and it has the active class. Okay, we could go ahead and add the inactive. Okay, btn element dot class list dot add, and I can add the inactive class in active class. Okay, so if I do that, go to the browser and you can see the inactive class, and right now there are three classes: the btn, the active, and inactive. Of course, the last one is the one which is affecting the way css works. The code that is last here is the one that works. That's why the active class cannot work. Okay, so this is great. So you can see you can add classes. You can add classes to elements, and all elements, there is nothing to say like this is not this element. All elements, you can use this same technique. Okay, and we are going to see how we are going to make something at the end of this lesson, something very interesting. Okay, so let's move on to what so you see, in modifying classes we have adding classes, and there at the same time we can remove classes. Okay, so how do we remove classes? Let's go back this side. So we have removing classes. So already we know there is this inactive class, active class, and btn class. So I can just go ahead, for instance, I remove the inactive class. So I can just say btn element dot class list dot remove. Okay, so you have this dot remove, and we can remove the inactive class. Inactive. Okay, so we can remove the inactive class, and you can see it is gone, and we have the active class. I can also go ahead and remove the active class now. So I can just say btn element dot class list dot remove, and I can remove the active class. Okay, like that, active class, and it is also gone, and we have back to btn. So you see, you have the power of adding and removing classes. This is so much powerful. And there is another one whereby you can toggle. Okay, so that is the last one. I think you can toggle classes. Okay, you can toggle classes using class list. I think a class list has that toggle class. Let's first try it. So btn element dot class list dot toggle. Okay, so what does the toggle mean? So for instance, let's toggle active. Okay, so if we do this, in this case is going to add it. Okay, let me refresh here and show you. So it has added. So what does toggle mean? So toggle means if the active class is there, remove it. If it is not there, add it. So you can see here we removed it. That's why it actually added. So toggle, it removes it if it is there, and it adds it if it is not there. So it checks, it first checks if it is there, and it adds it, and if it is not, then it removes it. Okay, so this is great. We have already looked at adding, removing, and toggling classes. Okay, toggling classes, that is great. Now next, let's see how we modify the text. Okay, so modifying the text, we have to we have actually 3 of them for modifying text. Let's jump into them and see how do we modify text. Okay, modifying text, you can use, the first one is inner text. Okay, so the first way to access element stuff, for instance, we could just get this paragraph. Okay, I can get this paragraph. Let me give it a class called parlor. Okay, So I've given this class para. I can use it to select it this side in JS. So on top here, I can select one more element. So const para element, since we have been using element. So document dot query selector. Please get yourself used to this selector, please. Okay, this is a class, so you put a dot. So always remember, this selector selects the way we select in CSS. So you could always first even test this thing in CSS. If it works, then it will even work here. But let's console.log this one so that we see if it is working. Okay, so I'm just going to put it here, and I put this para element here. Always first confirm you have selected it. Okay, and yeah, it is here, so you can see we can select it there. So let's go ahead and start manipulating it. Okay, so we are looking at modifying text. Okay, so modifying text, we are meaning modifying this real text. Okay, we looked at modifying classes, modifying styles. Now we are on modifying text. So if I wanted to get the para element dot, so there are three classes, three methods we can use to modify the text part of an element. So the first one, let's look at inner text. So the first one is called inner text method. So I can just say para element dot inner. So I think it is called inner text, not inner HTML. Okay, we have inner HTML is there, but this one I guess is inner text. Yeah, so let's first try inner text, though we'll also look at inner HTML in a minute. Inner text is equal to, this is a modified version of the paragraph. Okay, we could just the paragraph. Okay, let me just save it like that, and let's check, and voila, you can see it here. This is a modified version of the paragraph. Okay, whatever this means, but what my point try to mean, you see now using the inner text, okay, we are able to change the inside text of this paragraph. So in normal circumstances, this is not the paragraph that was there, and it has been modified. Okay, so you can change the text of anything at any point. So that is the first method, using the inner text. Okay, so there is this inner text, you can use this one to change it. So the second one is inner HTML. And we can just say para element dot inner HTML, and you could just say this is the second version, or you could just say this is the inner HTML version, the inner HTML version. This is the inner HTML version. So here we can put version of the paragraph. Okay, so this is the inner HTML version. Okay, and if we check, you can see this is the inner HTML version of the paragraph. It is replacing it because this one comes after in the code, and this one is going to takes the precedence. So next, we can look at the another one, which is text content. So, and we like using this one. Me personally like using text content because like it sounds more actually in English. You see that you are accessing the text content of that element. So here we could just say per element dot text content is equal to, so you could just say this is the latest version of the text by text content. Okay, so you check in the browser now, you can see this is the latest version of the text by text content. Okay, so you can see we have modified the text using these three objects or three methods that exist on these elements. And this is really for all element, whether you did on the button, whether you did on which element, it would replace the inner text. However, now the what normally confuses people is if we had a form, of which I'm just going to put here in a minute. So if we had a form, and inside this form we have there some inputs, so let's just have here a label for maybe text, for maybe what, name. Okay, and here let me just say username, username, and let's put here an input, so input text. Okay, okay, so like that. So if we went to the browser, we could have an input like that. Okay, now for inputs like these ones, for them you have to be careful because they have more ways how we access their things. Okay, so for instance, if it had a value for it, these ones they always have what we call values. So if I typed in here value, and let me just say JB or John Doe, let me write here John Doe. So if I write John Doe, this John Doe is going to be inside here. Okay, so great. So if I wanted to access this one, this is not the text content. If you look here, this input has no text content. Okay, the inputs don't have the text part of it, they simply have values. So if I wanted to get this one, I would give it an ID here. Let's call it username, and I can select it in JavaScript using that. So let me go on top here and I select it. Go here and let's add const input element is equal to document dot query selector, and this one we are selecting it by an ID called username. Okay, and I can first even console.log this one to confirm if it is been selected. Yeah, the input has been selected and you can see it here. So you will not come and use the text content or the what. So instead here we use value. Okay, we use what? We use the value. So you could just say it is username, what did we call it? Let's first confirm here. We called it what? Input element. Okay, so good. So input element dot, so instead of using text content, you access using dot value. Okay, So even if you try to console, by the way, for instance here, you could even first console.log input input element dot value. Okay, so if you console.log that is going to show you actually the input is John Doe. Okay, so you can see we can input it, and so if we wanted to manipulate it, we still actually use the same thing. Okay, for instance, we can just say is equal to why not John speak. Okay, John speak. Okay, I'm not sure if that is the spelling of speak, but we could just have something like that. And if you go and check now, you see that the text content has changed to John speak. Okay, so this is for inputs. Particularly, we use the what? We use the value. Okay, I wanted to mention that for future reference when we are just working with inputs. For it accessing, we access its value, not the text content. Okay, so great. Great. So we can modify now the classes, we can modify the text. Let's see next. So we can also modify attributes. Okay, you could say for instance id, the way we were coding id, and because there was what we could say element.id and give it id, but that one is only for id and classes. But here really we can set any attribute. Okay, we can set any attribute. If you want to give it a name, if you want to give it anything, you can actually set any attribute that you want. Okay, so for instance, we can give, for instance, let's go back in this side, and to our button, you see that the button has no id, so we could of course give it an id. I guess we did we give the button the id? The button has no id, so we can start with that, and we use the set attribute. Okay, we use a class called set attribute, and there is also remove attribute. So you can set the attribute and it takes in two values. So this method takes in two values: the name of the attribute and the value you want to put in that attribute. Okay, so let's put, for instance, in this button, let's give it for now, let's first remove this class. We could go to this button. We already have it selected. It is button here. It is button element. So let's see modifying down here, modifying attributes, modifying attributes. Okay, so the first one is adding attributes. So adding attributes. And how do we add an attribute? So we select the button, so button element dot set attribute. Okay, so this set attribute takes in two values. It takes in two parameters, and the first one is the name of the attribute you want to give. For instance, we could say id. Okay, and what is the value of the id? We could call it btn. Okay, as simple as that. Okay, we could just call it btn. And if you check now in the browser, let's refresh, you can see now that the button has an id of button. Okay, so this is the attribute we have just added now. This btn, the id is equal btn. Okay, we could add more attributes. Okay, we could add more attributes. For instance, let's come here to this input and we give it a name and a class. Okay, so we could just go to input, input element dot not class but set attribute, and we can give it an attribute called name, and then we give it value here, and let's give it username. Okay, let's go ahead and give it another one, input element dot set attribute, and we can give it another one, a class. Let's give it a class, why not? So give it a class, and this class, let's give it a name, and we could just call it maybe, yeah, maybe text input, like that. And let's check in the browser now, and you can see that our input has now the name, username, and the class text input. Okay, so these are very valuable because you could find that this name, of course, you could use it in PHP, and this text input class, we could use it in CSS to add more fancy things to this stuff. So for instance, we could just come and say text input, and in JavaScript for in CSS this side, and this class we could go ahead, for instance, give some little padding, top and bottom, maybe 0.4 rem and 1 rem, like the padding, and it makes the difference, you see. So we could just dynamically add classes, by the way, using set attributes. Okay, so this is how powerful set attribute is. It can add attributes, and even to the ones you don't know, guys, not necessarily that you add these ones. You could add any of your own choice you want to create. You can create custom data, custom attributes. Okay, so for instance, this name, I can give it this button, I can give it a custom attribute. So let's say on this button down here, so button element dot set attribute, I can give it a custom one, for instance, data ID, and I can give this one to maybe 1. Okay, so data ID, I would give it 1, maybe, like that. And you see that, let's refresh again. So you can see that I have here an attribute or a custom attribute called data ID, and it is 1. So this is so much great. We are going to see how we access these attributes. In the future, they will be so much helpful to look at this data, this kind of custom, these custom attributes. Okay, so next, let's see how we remove attributes. So in this, we simply remove attribute, and we only specify the name. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the input element, and I'm just going to remove, so input elements. Okay, and here let me put a subheading that this is removing attributes, remove attributes. Okay, so on the input, for instance, we can remove attribute. So input element dot remove attribute, and you simply specify the name of the attribute that you want to remove. So for instance, we could just say name. Okay, so simply mention name, only that, and you see that the name attribute on the input is gone. Okay, so this is how you remove attributes. Simply remove the name, and that one will be gone. Okay, great. So another thing is, for instance, you have not asked if we could change the type. So for instance, here the type is text. What if we try to modify it to So here where we are adding class attributes, let's try to change the one that is existing. Okay, input element dot set attribute. Now the attribute you are setting is already existing type, and want to give it password. Okay, I'm very curious to see what will happen. Yep, and you can see it changes. So this is very great. Those ones who are asking how do you toggle off and on the show password technique, this is the thing we use. Okay, this is the something we use, and we are going to show it. I think at the end of the day we should show how we can modify that one. Okay, oh great. So we see we can so input, we can remove them, we can add them, we can modify existing ones, and you can add new ones. Okay, so this is great. This is great. Let's move on. So now the next big thing you're going to look at are events and event listeners. Guys, we are getting into more interesting parts of JavaScript. If there are some nice stuff I like most is when we are talking about the DOM and DOM manipulation, when you're talking about events and event listeners. Guys, we are getting into deep waters, and this is getting good. Okay, so at this point we have events. So what are events and what are event listeners? And this is where the interaction, where we will always talk about user interactions, this is the point where we look at them. So while we're in the browser and users are busy doing something, so when you have users coming to your application, those users are busy doing different things. They are scrolling, they are browsing, they are clicking, they are doing a lot of actions. Okay, so those actions are what we call events. So events are actions that occur as a result of user interaction with a web page, such as clicking a button, hovering over an element. So there are so many events, or there are so many actions that users do while they are on a web page. Okay, you can imagine those things you normally do when you're on a web page. You are busy scrolling, that is one thing. You are busy doing stuff. You are busy hovering, you are busy clicking, navigating, and doing multiple things. So one thing is we can listen for these events. So we said those actions are called events, and JavaScript has a way for us to listen to those events. Okay, so as those events are happening, we can listen to those events, and we can do something when certain events happen. Okay, so for instance, event listeners. So event listeners are functions that execute in response to a specific event occurring. So you can be listening for a click on a certain button, and when that click is happens, then a certain function can fire, or a certain function can be executed in response to that click. That is what we call an event listener. Okay, so you can add event listeners to elements in your HTML code by using a method called add event listener method. Okay, so this method is very powerful, and it is going to become part and parcel of us as we are doing our stuff. So this method is very powerful. Okay, this method, you have to understand this method, or this method, it took me time to understand, and it's because I did not read this statement. Okay, so whenever we talk about methods, the first thing you should always be asking, what are the arguments? Okay, what does this method take in as an argument? if you understand that, and then another thing to understand always is what does this method return. This method takes in this method returns this. That one, it is very good to understand, and it gives you an easy way of getting faster these methods, how they work. So one of the most important methods in JavaScript is add event listener, and you're going to see we're going to be using it every other time, whether we are doing an application or we are doing any interaction in the browser. We always use this method, add event listener method. Okay, so this method takes in two arguments. Okay, the first one is the name of the event you are trying to listen to. Okay, so if you're trying to listen for a hover, the event is hover. If you're trying to listen for a click, the event is click. If you're trying to listen for submitting, the event is submit. There are so many events that are out there. We are going to look at the list in a minute, but there are so many, and you can always Google which event do I want to tackle here. Okay, so the syntax of using an event listener is something like this. So you have the element that you selected from HTML, and you can listen to it. You can add for an event listener, and then you can do something when that event happens. Okay, so you can do a number of things for sure, and this is really great. We can listen for events, and then there is also a function to run when that event happens. So it takes in the name of the event, and then it also takes in a function to run when that event occurs. Okay, so for instance, there is a button, and what happens when this button clicks? So run a function x if this thing happens. Okay, so let's do some examples. This is something we have always waited to see, and we look at the superpowers of JavaScript. So I'm just going to put here down events and event listeners, events and event listeners. This is why you can make even games, you can make anything at this point. Anything comes to your mind, you can make it. Okay, so let's look at what we have in our browser first of all. So for instance, we have this cool thing here. Okay, you have seen show password technique, the one Google uses. Okay, we can actually try to implement, and you see if we can do that. So down here, I'm just going to add one more button. Okay, I could add one more button down here in the form. Let me just add a button, a user button. So give it not that button, and I could just say, for instance, show password. Okay, so you can see show password. Okay, so now this is our button is showing show password, and we can give it an ID. Of course, let's first give it a class of btn so that we style it. Let's give it btn, and let's also give it an ID of show password. Okay, show btn. Okay, so we could select it in JavaScript. So let's select it in JavaScript here, and let me just select it from down here so that we can look at it very well. Const show btn is equal to document dot query selector, and I'm just going to say this is show btn like that, and I could first console.log it down here to confirm if I have selected it very well. And you can see whenever you are having any issues with your JavaScript, first console, try it console, you might find you are having a typo, or you are having a spelling issue, and first go back and first console these elements. Always when you're troubleshooting, console first, is this button being selected properly? Okay, console it in the browser and you check if it has been properly done. Okay, so you can see here I have my button here working. So I do one step at a time. Okay, so now what do we want to do with this button? Okay, so what we want to do is we want to listen for a click. Okay, so what we want to see, if someone clicks this button, can we listen that really someone has clicked here? That is the first step. So how do we listen? We listen using event listeners. Okay, we want to listen using event listener. So how do we add an event listener? So adding an event listener. So how do we add event listeners? Okay, so we get the element which is showBtn dot add event listener. Okay, and what did we say the event listener method takes in? It takes in two things. The first one is the event we are waiting for, and in this case is a click. So we are waiting for a click event. So this is the name of the event we are listening to, comma, the second event is the function that should be run if the event occurs. And we can write our function here, why not? So write a function. Whether you want to write an arrow function, I have no problem. Write the function like that. And this is the function expression. And this function can take in, depending on what you want to do, you can take in an event or not. Okay, but this time just keep it simple. And there's this function, for instance, console.log clicked. Okay, you can just say showBtn clicked, showBtn clicked. Okay, I want guys to be take a serious close look at this. This is where people get lost, and most especially even me, I got lost at this point. Okay, and an event listener takes in two parameters. I want to repeat. So this is a function that we could even put outside here, and then we call it here. So here we have a function. Okay, it takes in two things. It takes in a click, and then takes in the function that should be run when this event happens. And that's why I wrote this function here. Okay, I wrote the whole function here, the way we do it. And this function is doing console.log showBtn clicked. So let's try it out. So I'm just going to click here. Okay, and you saw what happens. Since this button is in the form, okay, since this button is in the form, now what normally happens is that when you have things inside the form, the buttons inside the form have a different behavior. Okay, these buttons inside the form, they always have a different behavior because they are expected to do like submit the form and do something like that. So when you click, you actually see it reloading the page and doing nothing else. And it is what it is trying to do is trying actually to submit. Okay, so if we wanted, we could put it out of the form. Okay, and I show you what I'm meaning. So here, let me remove it out of the form and put it outside here. Okay, and if I click now, you see showBtn clicked. It is working. Why is it working? It is because it's not inside a form. So we are going to talk about that, the default behavior. Okay, there is how buttons behave when they are inside the form, and that is the default behavior. And sometimes we always first remove that, stop that default behavior. Okay, for now let's just leave it outside here, and we first do whatever we are doing before we get into advanced things now. Okay, it is, my button is outside the form, but I want to show this password. Okay, so what you have confirmed first is that actually the browser is listening. Okay, when I clicked, it showed this show btn. Let me refresh. Okay, and click. Okay, you see this app here, app.js56, show btn clicked. Okay, so that means it is actually listening for my clicks. Every time I click, you see that? Every time I click, it is counting how many times I'm even clicking. Okay, so it is busy listening for my click. So what do we want to do? Okay, so first of all, let's first, there is where we had this attribute, change it here. So we want to change this attribute. Okay, we would want to change this attribute. So I want to show this show btn clicked, like so. So what we want is, when we click it, set this attribute to password. Okay, of course right now you can see it is just like that. So it is John speak. So if I click, you see that it is hiding the password. But of course, if I click again, it keeps on hiding the password. There is nothing. So we have to get away, first of all, of how we can keep on. If we click the first time, it shows it. If we click the second time, it hides it, like that. So how would we toggle that? Okay, how would we toggle that? Okay, this is where we bring in the ifs. Okay, this is where we would bring in ifs. Okay, now first of all, we could check the existing type. Okay, we could look at what is the existing attribute. So how do we know the attribute that is present there? Okay, for instance, we could just, so if the input, if the password input is this, do this. If the input password is this, do this. So how do we check for the attribute? Okay, okay, so now we could see some other methods that are existing. For instance, if I said input element dot attribute, not attribute actually. Okay, so for instance, this is actually a great thing to show. So you know very well, we will have this input and we would want to check the attribute. Okay, so okay, so this is somehow actually advanced. I don't want to talk about that topic now of checking the attributes, but we can just do one thing. Let's do this. So let's just say this one quite hide password. Okay, because in the first place we are showing the password. So let this one be hide password. When we click it, it hides the password. Okay, we'll talk about show password in a minute. It is somehow advanced than I expected. I don't want to make this hard. Okay, so remember guys, what we are only doing is, when this click happens, do this. This is the function that is run when it happens. The first thing you are doing, we are consoling.log here, and you can see when you click, it does that. The second thing it is doing is getting the input and setting the attribute of type to password. Okay, and if we do that, hide the password, and you can see it is hiding the password. And how is it doing it? Is setting this attribute to password. Okay, so now we could go ahead and do an if statement. Okay, we could do an if statement. For instance, if we could do one other thing, for instance, we could just say use a class that if this is hide password, it adds a class on it saying hide password, or hide here on this button. What do I mean? We can just say, for instance, here that if it does this, it can also say we could select the show btn itself, and first of all we could change class list dot add, and we can add some kind of like password hidden. Okay, hidden, we could just say also add this hidden. So this class is to help us to know, okay, is the password hidden or not? So if we hide the password, we want to add this class hidden. So let's first do that. We see if that class is added. So I hide the password, check here the button, or first way show btn dot classes dot add hidden. Okay, it doesn't look like it has anything to do with that. Okay, before we complicate this, at least let's stop it at that. Okay, let's stop it at that. I might just start complicating it, and the whole concept might not make the sense. Okay, so the only thing I wanted to show in this concept of adding event listener is you have an event you are listening to, and then you have a function to execute. Okay, so for instance, we can listen for a click, and you can see we console.log button has been clicked, and so forth and so on. Okay, so let's just do another good example that we would enjoy, because the forms and even these ones we might get into greedy needy advanced topics before we reach there. Forms have some other advanced topics that you are going to look at when you're handling them. Okay, so let's just do some more stuff here. In a minute we are about to finish, guys. Let me just go down here and add in more things. So for instance, I'm just going to add a shape dot shape. Okay, and this shape can be anything. Okay, so for instance, let's try to make it different shapes. So how would we make let's first make something out of it. Let's first make like a square. So I'm just going to give a shape a square shape by giving it width of 400 pixels, height of 400 pixels, and background color, let's give it red. Okay, so if I check, this is how it looks like, and let me reduce this to 200, and let's see now how it looks like. Okay, yeah, right now is good. Right now is good. Okay, and of course we could give it margin 0 auto, somehow to put it in the center. Let's see. Yeah, so it is in the center now. And we could go ahead, yeah, we could just go ahead and give margin top and bottom maybe 2 rem, maybe 1 rem can work to give some kind of space. Yeah, so this is good. So I want to put a button down there for changing the shape. Okay, for changing the shape, so button. Okay, and I'm just going to give it a class of btn, and then for instance here we are going to say change shape. Okay, change shape, and from there we have a button down here called change shape. Okay, that is good. Now what we want is, and by the way, this margin we could give only margin top so that the button is nearby. So how about centering? How about saying margin 0 auto here, and then here I'm just going to say margin top to 1 rem, so that we only have margin on top and bottom we have a button. Okay, this is, oh, okay, not margin top here, we want margin. Okay, so this is great. So we can look at the change, so we can click this button change shape to change any shape we want. So let's just make some different shapes. Let's first make a rectangle. Okay, let's make a rectangle. So a rectangle would change the width. Let's change width to be maybe 250 pixels, and let's say height be 100 pixels, like that. So this is a rectangle. Okay, we can leave this the way they are. We can go ahead and make a circle. So I have a circle. The circle is as having border radius of 50%, only that. And I could also make a triangle, but let's just leave a triangle is somehow complicated at this point. Let's just have these two. So we have our rectangle and we have our circle. Okay, and we could just start with here instead of change shape. Okay, it's okay. So we could just say click. So if we change shape, or we could just say change it to circle or change something, but you just say change shape, and here we're just going to say this is a square. So I want to put inside the rectangle here some text, and you see how JavaScript can be how it can shine. Okay, so I want to put here in the shape, I want to put the type of the shape. So here we are having a square. Okay, a square. Okay, and we can center it using flex. So go to the shape. First of all, let's give it color white. So I'm just going to give it color white, and let's see, give it also display flex, align items center, and justify content center. Okay, so this one we just center it, our shape here, there is nothing much. Okay, so what is the intention we're trying to change here? So what I want is, if I change shape, if I click change shape, and if I change it, for instance, the first time to a circle, so we'll start with a circle actually here. So change to circle, or we could even put different buttons for doing different activities. Okay, we could do 3 buttons. to be specific, change, make, you just go in this one and make it square. So make square. Okay, let's make another one. Let's make another one for make rectangle, and make, this is not make square, make circle. Okay, so there are the two shapes we have. So we are starting with a square and want to make a circle, and down here there is make a rectangle. Okay, so this is a great start. So what is our intention? So what do we want the user to interact, or what do we want the user to feel? So we want the user that if we click make circle, okay, if this event, the click event happens, we want to change this to a circle, and we also want to change this word inside to circle. And if someone clicks make rectangle, we want to make this one a rectangle, and we change this word inside to a rectangle. Okay, so the first thing is to know what do I want to do. Okay, in JavaScript you must know what is the intention you want to do. What do you want to achieve? The objective of what you want to achieve must be so clear. What do I want to achieve in this assignment? So let's put here assignment. So the assignment we have, if possible, first write it down in your notebook. What do you want to achieve first? So one is, okay, so when clicked, so when the shape is clicked, okay, when we want it clicked, change it to a circle, change it to that, to the, maybe to the required shape, or change it to the circle. For instance, let's take example of a circle, change it to a circle. So the first thing is, you have to first knowing the logic you are going to use behind. There are two things here. Okay, the first one is the sequence. So you must know sequence of events, and what happens for each event, what happens on each event. This is just like preparing a wedding, and you know, at this time this function is going to happen. We are going to do this thing, we are going to do this. When the visitors come, splash the flowers. If this one does this, do this. And this is actually what we are exactly doing here. So we are having, the first assignment is when we click the shape, when the button is clicked, change the shape. Actually, not when the shape, when the btn, okay, not the shape. When the btn is clicked, change the shape to circle, for instance, for the first button. Okay, so what are the steps do you take? The first step is select the parties to be involved. So if you look here, there are two parties. When the button, so we are having the button to be clicked. In the same statement, we have the event clicked, so the event is clicked here. Third, we have also the shape that is going to be changed. So those are the three things you have to take care of. So I will first click the button, select the button, and this one of the make circle, we can call this one make circle, give it ID make circle. Okay, then this one, let's give it ID of make rectangle. Okay, as simple as that. And the logic behind is, if we click this make circle, we want to get this shape and we add the class we did this side. Okay, we want to add this class here. want to add this class, like the rectangle class or the circle class. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how we can make this logic. First step, select the buttons, or select the button you want to add the click event. So make circle is the button I want. So I'm just going to come in JavaScript and select it here. So const, okay, make circle button. And you see how I'm naming my stuff? Name them according to what they do. If it is making circle, make it make circle. So make circle btn is document dot query selector, and we are selecting the button whose ID is make circle. You can go ahead and console this on the console, console.log make circle btn, this one. Okay, make circle btn. If you do that, okay, so you see the make circle btn is here. So the second one is, so how do I add an event listener? So now at this point I add, so I've selected this button, okay, and then I also need to select this shape. Okay, the shape is where we want to apply, so I also select the shape. So const shape, okay, I could say document dot query selector, and we can select the one with a class shape. So we know our shape here has a class called shape, this one, and we can use that one to select it. You can go ahead and console.log shape, confirm that you have selected it. Please, I repeat, 99% of the problems come from not selecting the right item. Okay, so you can see we have make shape here and it is well selected. Okay, now at this point we can now, after you have selected the two parties, the button that is going to make the change and the shape where you want to apply the changes, is after that you add an event listener. So let's add an event listener. So where are we adding the event listener? We add it, or where the action is going to be, we add it to the button, not on the shape. We add it to the button. So you come here and say make circle button dot add event listener. So want to listen to this, add event listener. And what is the event we are listening to? We are listening to a click. And when that click happens, what do we want to do? We want to do this function. Okay, so write your function as usual like that. And yes, so what do we want to return? First of all is this to is clicked. Okay, console.log, okay, make circle btn clicked, make circle btn clicked, like that. Make circle btn clicked, and let's try it. Make circle, click it, make circle button clicked. So this is good, it is working. Now we go ahead and implement. We don't want just to console.log that. What we want is to get this shape. So get the shape dot class list dot add, and what are we adding? So we are adding this class we have in CSS. So the circle is made by putting border radius 50%, and it is what the circle is doing. So we are trying to add this class circle. Okay, so add circle here. Okay, shape dot class list dot add. Now people forget and always put a dot here. Please, if you are just working with the class list, you simply add the name of the class, not a dot. Okay, I used to mess up there like that. So when we click now, you see the magic, make circle. You see that? but then the text inside here did not check. So want the when this one is a circle, want this one also to change to circle. So what do we do? So inside here we can go ahead and also say shape dot text content is equal to circle. Okay, so change the inner text or change its text content and also make it circle. So let's repeat now. So right now it is square, click make circle, and you can see it is a circle. This is good, man. This is really great. You're starting now to manipulate and seeing the power of JavaScript. Okay, so let's go ahead and see the make rectangle. How can we do that? So the make rectangle will go through the same steps. So at this point in the video, I want you to pause the video and first try to implement the make rectangle functionality to work. Okay, first select the rectangle button, select the shape. We have already selected the shape, so it's a matter of selecting the rectangle button, add an event listener, and then make it work. Okay, add those two classes and change the text content. Okay, so pause the video for a second, and then from there continue and do the challenge. So do the challenge, and after that you resume the video. Okay, so at this point pause the video for a second and do the assignment, and just afterwards continue. Okay, so I'm hoping you have done that and you have it working. But if you have failed to make it work, let's do it. Okay, so the first thing we do is select this button. So if you go back, this button, that make rectangle button, is the one that is going to make the action, is the one that is going to trigger the making of a rectangle. So that is where we are listening. We listen to this one. Okay, so go ahead and select it. So I'm just going to go down here and say const, okay, make rectangle btn is equal to document dot query selector. Of course, you could use even other selectors, the ones we looked at. They want to say document dot get element by id, but as I've told you, I like using query selector, and is what I'm going to stick to this at this point. But you can go and use get element by id, it still works. Okay, so query selector, and we are selecting make rectangle here. Okay, and we can just go ahead and add the event listener now. So add event listener, and the event listener we add it to the button. So make rectangle btn dot add event listener, and the event listener we are listening to is a click. And which function are we returning? So we return a function, and it has no arguments. So here we first do console.log make rectangle btn clicked, make rectangle btn clicked. Okay, so the make rectangle btn clicked. So if I go now and I click it, make rectangle btn clicked. So always first test if it is working before you go crazy adding more functionality to it. First make sure it is showing up in the console. Okay, make sure it is showing up in the console, and then before you add in any other things. Okay, so here I'm just going to go ahead and get the shape dot class list, okay, dot class list dot add, okay, class list dot add, And what are we adding? We are adding the rectangle class, rectangle. And to make sure you are adding the right thing, so you can see over here I have a typo. So make sure go to the CSS and choose the right class, Control C, come back to JavaScript and add a right class. Okay, you may find you're adding a wrong class here and you're asking why it is not working. Okay, so let's see the magic. Okay, click it, make a rectangle, and you see it actually has made a rectangle. Though we want to change this, okay, this square thing that is there. So we can go ahead and also say shape dot text content, shape dot text content dot add, not dot add, dot text content is equal to, and we want to add here rectangle. Okay, want add here rectangle. Yeah, so like that. Okay, so now if I click, okay, make a rectangle, and you see it makes a rectangle, and even the word changes to rectangle. If I say make circle, now that is where the problem comes. Okay, you see now how crooked it becomes. You see that? So you would want to first remove any other classes that were put. Okay, that is the trick. So before you always add like this one, you could first remove if there is any other shape that was there. So for instance, I could say shape dot remove. So if there were rectangle, shape dot class list dot remove. Okay, dot remove. What are we removing? Removing, for instance, if I'm making a circle, I want to remove the rectangle class. Okay, I want to remove this rectangle class, you get, so that it does not affect me. And even here when I'm making a circle, making a rectangle, the good thing is that this the square does not, or the circle does not affect the rectangle, but you could just go ahead and first remove that one. Okay, you could just say shape dot class list dot remove, and what do you remove? You can remove the circle class. So at this point you're going to remove this class before you add your class here. So now if we do that, if I first make here a circle, I make a rectangle, I go back and I make a circle, you see it actually is perfect, because the make circle is not only adding the circle class, but is first also removing the rectangle class. So if I come and say make rectangle, you see it is making it instantly. Okay, is making it instantly, and this is nice. Okay, this is nice. And guys, this is so great so far. We have done a lot. The event listeners are so sweet. So I want to show you another list of event listeners. We have the key down, the key up, focus, blur, submit, load, resize, scroll. There are so many. You can go to MDN document, just search in event listeners or events, JavaScript events, MDN, and it will bring you all the list of the events that you can listen to. There are so many, and we'll be looking at them in next videos. So in the next videos, we are going to have a couple of practice. We are going to do a number of projects. So far with all what we have, we are capable of building very serious applications. Okay, we are having a lot, and we are going to do more projects. So in the next video, we are starting with projects, and we are going to start looking at more and more projects. Okay, If you have any questions or if you want anything specifically for me to tackle, please, you can use our WhatsApp group, or you can comment in the YouTube comment section. You can comment something you want us to do. And at this point, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe, support us to continue making this content. Okay, I'm just going to end the video here, but just know in the next video we are going to start right away doing projects to put all these fundamentals that we have done into action. So you're going to do a lot of projects coming up, and you're going to look at specifically on events. We can do a lot on forms, we can do a lot on backgrounds. All those interesting projects, we are going to tackle them. Thank you so much for watching and for keeping around.